Fantastic.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the third webinar. Um, this is a series of 3 months, so I've got a bit over 2 left to go. We've also got a couple of workshops coming up. We've got one on Tuesday at Toledo. So that's looking at planning and producing a profit in both a livestock and a cropping operation. So we'll be at the Branksheim Hall first off, and then we're going out for a farm walk where we've had some grazing trials on a beef cattle place out there. Justin Clark's out at Toledo. And then next Friday, we've got a landscape monitoring training workshop down here at Franklin on my place. So that'll be similar sort of setup. We'll be looking at what landscape function is and how to create it and what it looks like on the ground, and we'll do a paddock walk and whatnot. So yeah, so that's happening next Friday the 15th. So, and then Tuesday the 13th for the other one. That doesn't sound right. Can that be Tuesday and then the 15th? Yes, it is. My maths is awful. All right. Thank you very much. And here's Graham.
So, with the financial, Celia, did it have any impact when you did it with me that first time?
Yeah, you put me out of business. So I went through, I was doing it through the Agrarians platform, and Graham was a financial trainer on that platform. And I went through and I had a tipping point of where, before I hadn't worked out at what point, at what cost the pellets could get to before it wasn't a going option. And it was during the drought in 2000 and oh gosh, what was it, Graham? Was it 17, 18, somewhere around there?
18.
18, yeah. And just realised that it was, I worked out the break-even point, and after that I had to shut the business down, and I knew when the pellets went over $1,000 a tonne that was it. But before that, I could have gone into it, into that drought, not knowing when to stop. And there are a lot of people down here, like small egg, chicken meat and pig producers, that actually lost their businesses because they didn't know that cutoff point. So it was super valuable to have that. Yeah, it was very, very timely to know when to stop. So, yeah.
Thanks for the introduction, and I'll do the share and move people around so I can see them. We'll get going. Very good. Oh, well, thanks again to TasFarm Innovation Hub and the Australian government for funding these workshops and the drought work that we're doing through RAND, which I think's is significant and world leading. So having Celia and myself travelled around the world, and also other people that have travelled a lot, there's nothing comparing to people that are using landscape function as their monitoring and base. So I think it's really great that what Tassie's doing. And I was listening to Bob Brown on the repeat on Phillip Adams, and we always struggle to promote. And he said what he'd learnt from the Franklin and things was that let nature speak for itself. And I just thought at that stage that I'm not telling anyone that we have hawks that use me as a bird dog. Sort of, they sit up above me and follow me around on the buggy, knowing that I'll flush the quail out of the long grass, and then they swoop down and get them, which causes me a bit of stress at the best of times. I feel like I'm being used and I'm just their tool. So so we need to do a lot more of that sort of promotion on just what's going on, and what we're doing for the environment as well as for nature and birds and everything. So used the other day, which I thought was great, by Darren Doherty at a talk or conference going on in Victoria, I think, is it the conference? And which I thought was great. So I really think that we need to have this, land-centered decision making, not people and not profit. So I've been thinking, how do I get this into the holistic management framework? Because most of the people there are making decisions about what they're trying to achieve and not having this land, biodiversity landscape function centered decision making. Um, so I think it's still really valid. If anyone can get a better one, I'd be really happy. I'd pick it up and use it straight away. Um, I've changed it for a version that Celia was doing a presentation on Saturday. I put in brackets under the profit, not production. Production is, if you chase production, you don't end up with profit and in regenerating land. So chasing production leads to the problems that we see with current agriculture and the declining terms of trade and increasing debt, which is why I keep putting this photo in. ABARES have just done an update. For those that haven't seen it, the blue line's the gross value. That's really the headline for ABARES. They never ever talk about what's happening with the net value of farm production. This isn't even profit, so excuse me, you've still got other things to come out of this. So it's really just not going so well. And that continuing separation is the declining terms of trade. They just posted this today that in 24-25, they believe it's going to be 85 billion. So those numbers on that graph are going to be updated at the end of the next quarter. January, February, March, end of March, they'll update that. But this value of production is always the gross, and average farm income is to recover from a large drop, rising by 47%. They never say how many billions farmers get from there. And I think it's disingenuous to quote a figure on a percentage. They always do the gross because the Australian government wants farmers to get up to 100 billion. This is one of those non-goals that so we've got tired land with tired aging farmers, and they pick a target like 100 billion. It's just absolutely ridiculous with increasing input costs and increasing debt. So it's about as unholistic as you can get. And then I find that there's a woman that spoke, Grace Anthony spoke on the Country Hour, and I might try and contact her because I've tried all the men and I don't get anywhere with trying to say to them, if you're serious, put up the net value of farm production as well as the gross value of farm production. So I'll leave this for you to read, but they're saying that basically that there's a declining terms of trade, elevated input costs, lower production volumes for crops, and lower livestock prices for that 24-25. And they're estimating that it's going to go to 16 billion. It hardly ever gets over 10 billion. So I'm sort of want to talk to them and just see what's going on. And this is sort of awkward, this orange and red thing, but this is an indicator of the terms of trade, and they're saying that it's going to continue to drop. I predicted when farmers got to over 100, and I think Celia can remember this, I kept saying there is no way the input suppliers will allow this to continue. And I said it multiple times. I do say things that don't come true, but I also predicted that the crops had failed in Victoria, and they didn't this year. So with the El Nino forecast, but yeah, they just looked at those numbers, looked at that graph, and cranked up the prices. And I used to work as an industrial chemist. I know how it works. All you do is try and think of an excuse. When we wanted to put up the price of the pigments and things like that, we were selling. I worked for Tioxide in the UK in London, and we'd go, oh, we used the oil price last time. What will we use this time? And so then they say, oh, it was the Ukrainian war, blah, blah, blah. So it's really, it's just manipulative. The landscape function still really solid. I haven't seen anywhere that it doesn't fail. I've got some soil carbon results that I may or may not get to here, but sort of, so we've got baseline, and I'm trying to do some more, but I don't think we've got enough. I've tried to do it on the cheap, joining in with a University of Queensland project on trying to reduce the cost of soil carbon tests. But if I don't get to it this week, I'll get to it next week. So any comments, questions on that? Sort of everyone very clear?
Yep, I've got a
Sure.
question, Graham. So can you just go over what the difference between soil cover and litter cover is, please?
Yeah, so litter cover, and specifically perennial grass litter, is the fourth leaf on the perennial ryegrass becomes litter, and then when it's on the ground, it becomes litter cover. If so, that's really important. Perennial grass litter, like perennial ryegrass litter, is much better than annual ryegrass litter for feeding the soil. It's got more nutrients. It's sort of that litter grown in the plants, then pushed onto the soil between the plants, is how sunlight gets into the soil, is what I've been trying to simplify to. But it provides all the impact protection from raindrops. And then once it's decomposing, it rapidly increases water infiltration and nutrient cycling as well. So this is really important. Litter cover, where did it come from? If did it wash in, it's not as good as if it grew in situ and you used it. So in our environment, it doesn't wash in generally. It's usually grown in the plants and put on the ground. And then at what stage is it decomposing? That drives the water infiltration and the nutrient cycling. And we go from slight decomposition, where it's just starting to look like compost, all the way through. So slight's a really big band, to when it starts to get visible fungal attack, is the description in the LFA manual. So you're starting to see that fungal attack like you see in healthy forest floor, in healthy compost, in healthy, that you'll see that fungal hyphae starting to go through and attack it. So that's what it is. Soil cover can be annual plants, rocks, trees, bits of wood, that sort of thing. Dung comes in as, I've forgotten. Soil cover or litter cover, I can't remember. I would have said litter cover, but I'll have to check that. So there's
Graham, sorry, you mean like live annual plants? They're counted as cover?
Yeah,
But
they
they don't
can
have to
be.
dead, I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Okay.
can be. Yeah. And they've got to
Yeah.
be under a certain height so that they're not, the rain doesn't drip off the plants and cap the soil surface and things like that. I think from memory it's 0.5 meter. So it's annual plants that are growing that are under 0.5 meter in height. So because you get that sort of acceleration of the raindrops and stuff. Be covering that next Friday in detail, so I'll remember by then which one dung is. So I'll have to reread it. So, and then surface roughness also has a big impact. And then as you increase recovery, you've got to increase stock density and utilization to keep it all cycling. But as you increase recovery, as long as you increase stock density and utilization, you'll increase all of these, which will increase all of these. So I haven't found an upper limit, but we've only ever really done sort of measured trials out to about 2 years. But it tends to just get better. And Peter Reynolds and myself are always completely surprised that with grass that's 2 years old, that's supposed to be, no nutrient value, all that, the animals, each mouthful seems to be worth about 5 equivalent mouthfuls of young grass. They sit in there and fill really quickly, and they want to sit down and ruminate. So, which is in complete conflict to what I was taught about the age of grass and, eating it before the 4th leaf emerged, or else it'll become unpalatable, all that sort of stuff. So we really need to do some more research. So if we could get a PhD or something on this, but it needs a lot of help to manage the trials at that sort of recovery, stock density and utilization. Because usually the animals are set up with the wrong rumens to go in there and work on that grass. They need to be on rumens that have got the right bugs for processing lignin. So the trouble is we're trying to feed a lot of sheep and cattle and ruminants as though they're monogastrics. And, it just causes all sorts of things, as well as for horses, our horses, we just never had to touch them because they were on old grass all the time. So didn't have to worry about all those other things. Sorry, that was that slide that Darren Doherty put up, sort of he stretched my thing out, but put in David Tongway, which I really liked. And I did this back in the 1990s with Kurt Gadzia. So just quickly,
see, everything's looking better on the menu. Patty's working harder than he used to. On a Facebook, face look like a photo shoot. Everything's the same. We got shy girls, body girls, smart girls. I can make a girl groove. All times, all right. Your whole life is like a...
That's from Caroline, who's on one of the other mentoring groups I write thing, and I just liked it, sort of. But then the next one, because I said I liked that the shy girl was a skinny cow, and then some of these are sort of like, what are you doing? What are you looking at? So and then this one I don't think's got any sound. So but so most people would think that was just horrible. So it's got green feed under it. They're basically in drought, they've been saying, or really dry summer at the moment over there now. And she's got green grass that's sort of knee high in under all that dry feed.
At what point does she graze, Graham?
Oh, well, she's a bit of a mixture, sort of. She paddles her own canoe, Caroline. So I really like that look. That's fantastic. To take that 320 day grass and graze at a high stock density and get cow performance on that is high level skill. So
but she's saying that was 150.
Yeah, not as good. Not as good. So that was what she was saying. So she's got green feed. So if you leave the recovery long enough, you'll have green feed underneath, not necessarily from some of those dry big phalaris plants, but from other things. Because we're trying to do, when I started training, and I want to be really clear, I taught people to go fast in spring. And what it does, if you go fast in spring, you break all the canopies. And we all know that if we have to walk through deep grass, that we're going to get wet. So what happens is those old dry feed canopies set up a micro water cycle under there that keeps everything green underneath and allows you to carry it through to sort of, the end of Feb, which is normally in southwest Victoria. If you'd gone through in spring and gone fast, you break the canopies, let all that out, take the green out, and now you would only have straw and you would have really tough animal performance. But, so you're not necessarily, the purpose of grazing is to increase landscape function, but we also have to make money So how can you do this that you don't need to use urea or lucerne hay or something else to keep their rumens going? So we try and keep green underneath to get through that. So it's really, saying that, and people will come up to you and say, "Oh, I grazed it 4 times in the spring," and and they're proud of how many laps they've done of the property. And I just go, "Well, like I don't know what to say. It's sort of embarrassing." But like usually if it's like this time of the year, "Oh, how are they going now?" "Oh, I'm feeding them a bit of hay or lucerne or something." And as soon as you do that, if you're going to run this model, you can't also make hay by loosening. You've got to be a low cost producer, because basically you've lowered your gross. So you've got to lower your expenses faster than you've lowered your gross. So we need to be really careful about the design for this. And this is why it needs to be that staged safe to fail trials, paddock trial, and then amplify if it's working for you. But don't expand or amplify until you know what you're doing and it's working. So this is really key to staging this into the business. You cannot just say, "I'm going to go from here to here," because it usually ends in tears with poor animal performance. So it's a few of those things that are, I just go, I'm probably banging on too much, but I
Hey,
suppose you
Graham,
get.
before you move on, just a quick question. Can you, regardless of all the practical factors, can you leave a paddock for too long? Do you, in your mind, do you think you can leave a paddock to recover for too long?
You can. When the perennial grasses, those dry perennial grasses, start to oxidize or go grey. So you'll see that, and the grey color, is the surface oxidizing, and you can scuff it off and things like that. So in a rainforest, this is the way I've been trying to explain. In a rainforest, the trees get chewed off by the biological activity and they're laying on the ground. And whenever you go into a rainforest, and it doesn't matter if it's Tassie or Cairns, you're stepping over these trees that have been chewed off at the bottom. In a brittle environment, a seasonally humid environment that's prone to oxidation, the trees will be still standing and they'll be all grey. And eventually they weather away and break and fall off and stuff. But the whole tree doesn't get chewed off at the base. It might fall over later as it starts to rot. But a lot of those, so they're quite different the way they react, those non-brittle rainforesty sort of areas. They look after themselves and do not need herbivores to increase in landscape function and biodiversity. So that's the model we have in our head for lock it up and leave it. The other model is, and you need to look at it. You can't guess. I get so many people. I'm arguing with a guy that, the wattles come marching in is one. So usually you'll see the grass is grey and oxidizing, then the trees come, but not always, because a lot of those grasses dying in the soil from not having their growth points cleared. So I need to go back a step. I've got too many things going. I've got brittleness and non-brittleness. And then how does the trees go? I shouldn't have read just thing, Spiky. So with trees, that shift from a grassland to woody weeds or to trees and forest is that the grasses grow from their growth points. If they get too much litter and start to choke themselves out because they can't get light to their growth points, they'll start to go grey and oxidizing, not always, because you can get partial grazing and all this sort of stuff, and then it'll tend to go woody. So that's the pathway to gorse or blackberry or woody weeds, or to trees or wattles or whatever. So we need to know that all the annual forby herby ones are from recoveries too short. You're killing the grasses because you're coming back too quick and you keep weakening them. The woodies 70% tend to be from not having their growth points cleared and enough animal impact to stop them from coming in. That's why you see blackberries in gullies and, you know, and gores and things like that. Like around Ballarat, they've locked up what used to be the old sort of droving, I've forgotten, stock routes, and now they've locked them up, and now they're all gores. So, so you need to start looking around. Usually, when you're not the driver, I try and focus on that. So, just a little dig to see if Celia's listening. See, yeah, so you've got to
I
be
can
careful.
multitask.
Yeah, sure. So, but yeah, so it's some of those things. So I'll keep coming back, Jordan, because I didn't do that very well. So I was running two things: carbon or plant material and biodiversity cycles different, where it's constantly humid, to where it's seasonally humid, and there's a range for that. And I say below 5 on the brittleness scale, it heals itself. So it'll increase in biodiversity, increase in landscape function. You'll get thriving, healthy forests with no weeds and lots of life. Above 5, when you lock it up, you'll get woody weeds, you'll get other weeds coming in, you'll get problems. So it needs to be, the carbon needs to be cycled through, usually through a ruminant in those areas. And that was those areas that we've desertified on the planet tend to be the brittle environments. So the same management that will restore biodiversity, so lakes, oceans, rest is the best tool that you can use on those. They will increase in biodiversity and restore themselves. In the seasonally humid areas that were grasslands and grassy woodlands, we need ruminants to complete the carbon cycle because they've got moisture in their guts. So they're bringing their carbon cycle processing in their ruminants, so, or their hind guts as well. So, which I tried to show last week with the wildebeest and the zebras and all running together. Is that all right? Did I do enough then? Wasn't confusing? I got confused somewhere there. So
Yeah, no, that was good. Thank you.
the so this was Rob's question. So irrigation paddocks in the summertime. What happens, Rob, is that sort of they're already, the soil profiles tends to be full. So once it starts raining in the winter, it just fills up. So I always tried to empty the, you know, because we suffered from this in Southwest Victoria as well. You know, if we'd had a lot of rain and it was already running to the dams by June, you knew it was going to be long and hard. You know, and you'll just hope, excuse me, you're just hoping that sort of July, August wouldn't be too wet because, you know, you'd be puddling around till November. So we were always a bit ahead of you. But, you know, when I first started, you know, we could, on the paddocks, I could bog the four-wheel motorbike and you'd get off, lift it up onto the top, you know, go again and bog it again in 10 meters, get off, lift it up. It was just a nightmare. And, you know, so, but once we got landscape function, got soil structure, got some resilience in it, it was never a problem. So you know you have a problem with soil detachment if the four-wheel motorbike or the ute or whatever your mode of transport is, as you drive it across the paddock, it leaves 2 dirty trails because it's like you've detached that soil surface to leave the 2 dirty trails. If you get full landscape function, you know, really high slight decomposition, so towards the visible fungal attack, and you start to do that, you leave clean marks as you go across the paddocks. So you just push the grass down.
Do you think hump and hollowing would be necessary if there was high landscape function?
It would be less necessary, but I know how wet it gets down there, Rob. And what I always did, I had paddocks like that down on the Camp Creek flat. So I should look up, I've forgotten the address. It was 150 Corona Lane. There it is. But, you know, on the flats, what I used to do was leave it till the end of January before we went down there. And people couldn't believe it because the cows, we had a creek that ran through the middle of that flat, and I'd have to take them out onto the road to walk them over the bridge to put them in the other side. And I'd let them eat the roadside, and people couldn't believe that our cows just thought the roadside was fantastic. And then I'd open the gate and they'd have to eat their way into that flat. And they'd be in there till well after the autumn break, sort of down on that flat, because the grass was sort of head high. And they were fine. So we were on green grass, all that. So we allocate, you know, when a real estate agent's selling a property, they always talk about it's got a really good combination of flats and hills for the winter. You know, they talk to you about that sort of stuff. So what do? We drain the flats and irrigate the hills. Do you know, I go, what? Do you know, it's sort of like we would just use the natural tendency of that and just plan around when we would go into those wet areas and then use them for summer feed. So the humping and hollowing, we know things like on Celia's, she didn't need to put the swales in. We know there's a lot of people fix a lot of problems. So I'd do a trial. If you still had a paddock that was doing, you know, that, how could you manage it so that you grazed it, maybe grazed it up until it started to get too wet, then left it until it got dry again and then into it again, or a certain area of a paddock. So we would get off that flat before it got too wet and then wouldn't come back to it till it was dry enough. But that took long recoveries and stuff, and cattle that were adapted. Oh, do we have to? Celia, Spikey's asked, could you tell your swale story? Oh, did I say out loud? Do we have to?
You did say that.
That'll give me a break.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I put swales in here. I did a permaculture course, and you know, it was swales, which are on contour drains. The same thing. So, because we'd have we'd have just a few mil of rain, and I could hear the water running through the grass. It was quite noticeable just listening to the water. But we've got like impermeable clay. It's very heavy. It's you don't try and dig it. So we put swales in, put 4, I suppose it was, down below the house, 4 or 5, I can't remember how many now, several hundred metres long, each of them. And you get 10 mil of rain and they'd fill up and overflow. And then we changed the grazing, introduced the high stock density and the longer recovery grazing. And we get 100 mil of rain now and they don't fill up. So they've just become a nuisance. And beforehand, when they did fill, the vegetation species went from it changed. It sort of was perennial and annual grasses because it was an old orchard and I didn't re-sow anything, so it was just what was there. So it went to docks and buttercups when I put the swales in. It was compacted. It was, just sodden. You couldn't drive on it at all. And then, after we changed the grazing, that it just went back to perennial grass. So there's no docks, there's no buttercups, there's no moss, except for where the wallabies have hammered it out the back. But different place. And I've started to fill the swales in because they're when I had the chicken trailers, you couldn't drive over them. You're risking snapping the hitch off the back. So as you sort of went over them, wobbled over them. So graze before you contemplate swales is my experience.
So thanks, Celia. That's that staged introduction of things as well. Don't go for the most expensive fossil fuel, dragging some sort of plow through the soil or something like that. Start with grazing, and if you can't get the function back, then maybe you might try broadcasting some seed, maybe, you know, like adding some other things, and then escalate as you go. But what we tend to do is sort of do the last thing that we did, and or that we heard about. So Dave Snowden from Complexity says we don't look for the best answer, we pattern match to the last thing we heard. So if it fits a pattern, or it had it for boys, if it had a machine in it, then that's what we go for. So, you know, so you've got to make sure that you do these things in the right order, and I'm really happy to keep talking about that. Irrigated paddocks and non-irrigated paddocks are nowhere near as productive, but usually more profitable, Rob. And we'll have to keep coming back to that. And I think that sort of with that multi-species comparing to paddocks, other paddocks in terms of profitability. So yeah, so it's really not about productivity or number of grazings. Is productivity a number of times you go through that paddock, or how much milk you get off it? What's the measure?
Yeah, I guess it would be how much money you're making from that paddock. So how much milk revenue from the milk minus the costs.
So it is more like
Yeah.
a profit, you're thinking?
You
So
could, yeah, I mean, yeah, I haven't really thought about it in depth, I guess, but yeah, I'll have to think about that one a bit more.
if you compare an irrigated paddock with a multi-species cover crop into it, with a poorly managed, too short a recovery, non-irrigated paddock, then it'll flog it. You know, but what I'm saying is that that's not the only one. That's really high risk. The biggest problem with irrigation is that usually the water makes it too dear, and then to make more money, we put more inputs, and then we're increasing our risk and costs and expenses all the time. And some people can do it and make money out of it, but like I work with some people that, you know, you'd say to them that they make a lot of money out of cows, and you'd say, oh, you've got to do it now without cows or animals, and they'd work out a way, you know. They'd make money folding envelopes. They're that sort of people. Like, so, but they're the ones that everyone points to. Normal people tend to need low cost, low risk practices to keep money in the business. So
yeah, just one thing, Graham. The water's actually free in our area. You just got to drill a bore. Yeah.
Wow. Do you pump it? You just...
Yeah, I'm surprised the water hasn't run out, because everyone's just putting in heaps of irrigation, and yeah, but so far it's all right.
Yeah, in southwest Victoria there was a big, I can't remember, Conda Aquifer it was called, and the water board people kept saying that, oh, we're living off the interest, and then it dropped, and it's a really big, it runs into South Australia out to sea sort of type aquifer, and it dropped by 1 meter or 2 1 year. And I said, I reckon we're into the capital now. Yeah, like so. And what they found was it was ancient water that had come in through the cracks and rocks of the old volcanoes in southwest Victoria. So it was a very small catchment to fill this up, this aquifer up. So we always get that wrong. They have in where we are here, because we've got an old irrigation bore here, and but we only use it for stock and domestic. So I wanted to say something about the weeds and spend a fair bit of time on that. I've done a bit, but the problem is never, and I think we need to get this idea, that the problem is never too much weed. The problem, I mean, like weed plants, the problem is not enough perennial grass. So you got to think, not how do I kill the weed, how do I grow more grass here? So high densities with longer recoveries and plant utilization, that will create the conditions to germinate the perennial grasses, which will push the Cape weed out. I've done this, and I think I've got a photo for it. But so we need to know that we're not trying to attack the weed. You've got to be a bit zen about the thing. I will grow grass. So longer rest periods, grow grass, get rid of Cape weed. Higher densities, promote germination of perennials, grow more grass, which will push out the Cape weed. So you're always trying to do that. So we'll have to come back to the multi-species. I didn't get time to do any work on that. And I've got some slides up further that's showing as you increase recovery, I'm a bit anal on this stuff, so please ignore. We use rest to mean nothing's being done on the land, whereas planned grazing, where you're coming back when the grasses are recovered, we call it recovery, but everyone else calls it rest, so it's sort of like one of those photos. So recovery increases landscape function, which increases nutrient cycling, which improves the fertility of the soil. And it improves it faster and better than adding things to the soil. And most people cannot cope with that, but I'll try and explain it up further. I'll put this in. I've just tried to do a flow chart. So what sort of weed is it? It's an annual grass forb. Recovery is too short. It's a low successional perennial grass. Recoveries between grazing is too short and stock density utilization too low. And then woody types, low stock density and low plant utilization. So you may pick up that I never reread anything. So I need someone to read for me because my brain's already gone on even when I'm reading it. So like, okay. And then, so put in a trial, safe to fail trial that would address that cause and see what happens to the weed. Do that as a first step. Do you know that so keep coming back to me if I'm not clear. I've been doing this stuff. I actually sort of get to the point that I can't understand why it's not clear. So just keep coming back and yelling at me. We didn't get that. If annual grass recovery is too short, low successional, your fog grass, silver grass, all those sort of things is same recovery too short. Wood is really long recoveries combined with low stock density and low plant utilization. So creates the conditions for them. So this is what we started with at Inverary when I took over in 2002. I won't go into any detail. We borrowed too much money, and I said it was all Cape weed, and then I go, oh no, sorry, I lied. There was some thistles, but it had been cropped. It was one of the Timbercore properties that got sold, and we bought what was left with the house. I won't say anything about the house, but I usually say bluestone, and I usually say if you like that sort of thing, so but so it was sort of 300 acres with the 2-story bluestone. It was all Cape weed, had been cropped and not resown, and then grazing only. We put it back to perennial grass, no fertilizer, no seed, no herbicide, no nothing. So when I talk about these things, I sometimes forget that I need to explain to people that I've done it. I try and only stick to the things that I've done. So that's the blue gums growing up. We owned those blue gums, and that I was trying to show that was that tree, and it's not quite the same perspective, but the trees were younger. They got older. So it took 3 to 4 years before you could see 4 years before you could see in the ground cover data that it didn't go bare in summer, when the Cape weed all dries off. So after 4 years, we had it back. But I always did a budget what would it have cost for us to spray it and re-sow it versus what grazing we got off just doing it ourselves? And all I did was trample a small patch till the cows got sick of it. If you look, there was some fog grass in here. See these plants here? The photo's a bit old, but there was grasses in through the fog grass, through the capeweed. It wasn't all capeweed. And then it just went to grass, and the trees got older and stuff like that. We started with other areas. This was summer crop. Can't remember the name at the moment, and put that back to grass as well. So took over in 2002, took that photo in September 2006. But we made money every year. And I was working for the MLA on the beef grading and stuff. So every month I'd be trying to buy more heifers to build the numbers up. So we had, nice stand of Ukes. Thanks, Tony. The woody weeds. So when the GM scientists clone the termite gene into us, we'll have something to eat. So I just always think that, this is what we did. This was another one. A lot of this is silvergrass and crook annuals and barley grass and that pussy tail, whatever that is. And all we did was push it onto the ground, and then this is all microlina germinating through it. We had a lot of onion grass. The South Australians call onion grass Western District ryegrass because we've got so much of it. And all I did was these trees had knocked this fence over, so I ran a tape through here and grazed that side and left this for longer recovery. And I'd fixed the fence and just come back and grazed it, and you could see where the tape was. So there was no onion grass here. This was just microlina and wallaby grass and weeping grass on this side. And I used to argue that it wasn't competitive enough to keep onion grass out until I saw these. This was another hill paddock, started with capeweed. That was that same one that I showed before. I'll go on. This was out at the Derwent Valley with that great young guy that I was talking about earlier, asking about cockchafers and Corby grubs and things like that. And he did this himself, before we started. Joyce, well done. Yeah, so and they put it back to grass. This is work we did out at Druthi Point on serrated tussock, and all we did was trample the litter. We didn't try and eat the serrated tussock, just trample the litter and germinate the cocksfoot, and then use that to push out the serrated tussock. So I was looking for weeds and things like that. So
did that work, Graham?
Oh, well, we only went back once. It was working, it was moving, but then the guy said, it was too much trouble. So, Barry left and stuff. So he was working with the guy, so he couldn't be bothered doing paddock sort of stuff. So,
because there was a heap of people really concerned about it at that field day at Richmond last week, that they were just tearing their hair out with it.
Yeah.
It's encroaching everywhere out there.
Oh, well, see if you graze it hard enough, it doesn't come in. If you lightly graze, there's for a lot of these tussock grasses, they require a certain management to make them work. I used to put this in and say, obviously the serrated tussock seed can't get through the fence into here. But I'm not saying that's good management, but it's not suffering like this side is from this plant. But this was up in these areas, up round whatever that weather station is on Druthi Point, sort of, used to be on the flight path into Hobart Airport, but I don't think it is, or I don't see it. Probably not interested, sort of done it too many times. But so the cocksfoot, you've got to germinate what you do want and then let that recover, fully established, then come back in again. So it's a staged thing. A lot of these, these sort of this sort of going from bare ground to that, you've got to be letting the plants establish and germinate. To go from that to that is not easy. You never want to go back, so. And once you've got the grass back, no inputs. It's all very, very good. This was increasing landscape function trial we did with Sydney University's Communities in Landscapes. I was working with Peter Ampt and Sarah Dornbus. And this was, we were just looking at farms that were innovators, or they call the, I didn't think they were innovators. They were trained in grazing management, and we were using landscape function analysis, measuring to look at their stability, infiltration, and nutrient cycling. This was the average over all the innovators. So some were far better than this and some weren't. And this was the results. The innovators had better soil pH without adding any lime or calcium or, you know, product X. The soil actually fixes itself if you increase landscape function. This is sort of why I'm trying to get farmers to ask their agronomist, do you know anything about landscape function? Because otherwise these results just look like, like I've made them up. They had more phosphorus available, and we see that all the time, that you get more phosphorus available, you get more nitrogen available, and you increase carbon. It just doesn't happen any other way. But you've got to increase landscape function. You can't wish this into being. And I think we're still stuck on magical thinking or something. I work with people, and they don't want to change anything they do or change the way they think about anything, but they want those results. I go, well, you've got to increase that. So when we did trials, I did with Kerry Bridle on soil carbon and stuff, the farms that increase landscape function, they increase carbon by 1% down to 30 centimetres in 1 year. And it was just unheard of. But the farms that didn't increase landscape function didn't increase carbon. It either stayed the same or got worse. So, like, I'm just lost for words. I'm being a real drama queen. So I'll go on. So this is I'm not going to get to your photos, Spikey. That's what's stressing me. So I'll have to leave them for next week if that's all right. And we'll do the that. So to do this justice, I won't get through this bit. So this is on
there's just a question from Ian there. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Graham, there's just a question from Ian related to what you were just talking about why only the top 10 centimetres. Surely at least the top 30 centimetres to 60.
Yeah, great question. And when we were doing this work, we were really following David Tongway's advice. And he said, if you're going to do it over that short a time, just go for the top 100 mil, the top 10 centimetres. Because we only had I thought we had unlimited funds, but we really did, with all the organisations we were buddy feeding, it was quite amazing because I wanted money for my time and they said no, but LLS was in there. So New South Wales DPI, Greening Australia, Landcare Australia, Landcare New South Wales, everyone was in there. And in this massive project, it was just a nightmare. So we were just saying over time, and the amount of money we had, let's just do that top 10 centimetres properly. I agree that, and recently we got those soil carbons, and I was asked, did I want the 60 centimetres to 100 centimetres measured as well? If you did, you'll have to pay for it yourself. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So these are the results Colin got from a paired paddock trial with his brother. So all of the nutrients go higher and more available. The calcium magnesium balances for the Albrecht, Albright sort of guys, the Brookfield people that worry about calcium magnesium, all the micronutrients got better. The only things that got worse, and we see this repeatedly, that the iron, the sodium, and the aluminium go down. So this is available, and the totals change, which causes so much stress for some people. the idea that increasing biological activity means you can source, you know, nutrients from the parent rock is no problem. For others, they just say they can't do it, but they never increase landscape function to check it. So it's an opinion, it's not science. So we can increase available and totals, and it's really easy to do. This is the difference in the soils. So these are a couple of meters inside Colin's place, and this is a couple of meters inside his brother's place. So, you know, I think that, you know, it's beyond reasonable doubt, but it's hard work. I was going to swear. It's hard work. You know, that. So Colin can remember his dad getting really grumpy if they didn't pay attention when they were ploughing, because they went through this layer and started to bring up this spewy rock layer. And now he's got this completely different soil that just keeps going down deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's really, it's beyond doubt, but you have to increase landscape function, and that's awkward and inconvenient. And I think all our focus needs to be, how do we shift animals at the required stock density and frequency, and learn how to monitor them and get the suitable phenotypes and genotypes that thrive on recovered grass. And we could change, I reckon we could draw down so much carbon in Australia, we'd put the planet into ice age. Do you know, we could turn the red centre into the green centre, but no one seems to be interested, and it's beyond belief for me. So just how important and relevant. It makes more money. It's awkward work, but it's work of you actually using the animals in a positive way. And then you're not re-sowing and using fossil fuel. You're sequestering more carbon than they emit through their methane, enteric methane. All those things are true, and we can prove them, but we just can't get in front of people. So I suggested earlier today that we should go and talk to Bob Brown about, I think I might have said it already. Any comments, questions before I lose my voice? So, was that good enough? Did I give it enough of a whack? Yeah. Oh, thanks, guys.
Well,
What are you thinking?
I was just going to reiterate about the workshop next Friday that's actually going to be looking into the landscape function side of things for those that weren't here right at the beginning. Down here at Franklin, that Graham's running, is coming over here next Monday, and also the workshop at Toledo next Tuesday, looking at, well, the farm walk that we're going on is a beef operation. We've been running trials there for a few years now, and looking at profitability and how to plan for a profit with livestock and with cropping. But there is a farm walk involved there as well. But
continue to weave the landscape function, and how do you do it in practice? So I think the big gap is advice on how to do this in practice. So
Celia, where do we find more information about these workshops?
Well, I'll put the links with the slides. I have sent them to the webmaster to go on, but I noticed they're not on yet. So I just, I'm going to put a Facebook post on the RANT Facebook page. And there's also I'm sending out the newsletter. It's almost finished tonight. So, and the links will be in that as well. So everybody that's on here is on the.
Should we be doing a WhatsApp group or something?
Well, that was just a note I've got written down here too. Yeah. Is that something everyone's interested in, to have their phone numbers and form a WhatsApp group for discussion outside of a Wednesday nights?
You were also going to mention that something about the presenter is being paid for emails and phone calls, I think, it from memory as well.
Yeah, I did put it in. I don't know that I said that you were paid, but yeah, so go hard. Flog him with phone calls and questions.
Yeah. So, you know, the purpose is to make a big difference. So don't be
Yeah.
shy. So
Whatever it takes. Yeah. So coolies.
I might, before next week, I'll send some comments, Spiky, and stuff as well. So
Mm.
very good.
Thanks, Christy. All right. Well,
Thanks, everyone.
yeah, don't forget to send through any questions or emails to either the Regen Ag email or directly to Graham. I think you've got that as well. So, and I just forward them through. Coolies.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
See you next
Thank
week.
you. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.